Hare Krishna and welcome to Krishna Fest. Today we are going to discuss a very relevant topic, especially in today's day and age, which is the topic on mental detox. Do you know that over 850 million people world over are having some or the other sort of mental disorder? The World Health Organization predicts that very soon, one in every four people around you are going to have some kind of a mental disorder. And we can see this is coming true already. In high profile sporting events, we can see sports people and even gymnastics, athletes, they are all quitting from these events because they are not able to deal with the problem of the mind. And this reality, these predictions are coming true. Very soon, it will no more be the common cold, but we will call it as a common clog, a clogging which is taking place in our mind. The mind is completely clogged with all kinds of toxicity. And this is where we need to really understand what is clogging this mind, what is this direction in which the world is heading, and most importantly, what can we do to ensure that we protect ourselves from this clogging of the mind, from this toxification of the mind. The ancient science of Yoga Sutras gives one of the most comprehensive and brilliant analysis of the mind. And it explains that the nature of the mind is to be still, like a nice, calm, peaceful lake. However, we do add a lot of pollutants, a lot of toxicity into this lake and completely change the balance of the mind. And this detoxified state of the mind undergoes what is called as vrittis or chitta vrittis. Vritti literally means a fluctuation, something that rotates, something that revolves. And chitta here means the mind. So in this book, Yoga Sutras, Patanjali begins by explaining that the real aim of this book is to help each and every one of us, to empower each and every one of us in declogging the mind, in detoxifying the mind, in helping us overcome these fluctuations or chitta vrittis. Now, our mind is always fluctuating. There are always thoughts that are going through us, right? So some of you may be wondering, what's wrong with these fluctuations? What happens if I do not control these fluctuations, right? Patanjali very beautifully explains, vritti sarupyam itaratara, meaning if you do not control the mind, then vritti sarupyam, one starts identifying with these fluctuations. We have a very calm, peaceful, eternal, cognizant, blissful identity. But if we do not learn to control these vrittis, we start identifying with these vrittis, we start identifying with this toxicity. And very soon, you will start thinking that we are a toxified person, we are a bad person. No, we are not bad. It is the mind which is superimposing its fluctuations upon us, its toxic thoughts upon us, and giving us a perception that we are bad. And this is how, believe it or not, our mind shapes our perception of reality. So it is so very important that we learn to deal with the mind and its different fluctuations, especially in today's modern age, where we have become a society which is constantly guzzling data from different corners. In this whole world frenzied in social media, there are so many distractions hitting towards the mind. So it is all the more important that we learn how to protect our mind and how to detoxify the mind. So how do we deal with this problem of mental detoxification, right? So as some of you might have heard, that this life is a beautiful journey and we have to move ahead in our life. We cannot stop these thoughts. We cannot stop these fluctuations. we cannot stop these mental patterns, right? Just as much as we cannot stop this journey of life. In a journey, as we want to go ahead, we use a vehicle. The mind is like that kind of a vehicle for us to move ahead in this journey of life. In any vehicle, we see there is the accelerator and there is the brake. We need to find a balance between this accelerator and brake. What does the brake do? A brake prevents accidents from taking place. In the language of the Yoga Sutras, this brake or this restriction that we put upon ourselves, Patanjali defines as Vairagya. Vairagya means dispassion. Now, many times we very immaturely interpret dispassion to be some kind of a superficial detachment or renunciation, right? And many times this very word dispassion or detachment creates a fear in the hearts of people, thinking that, oh, what if I become dispassionate? I lose all my ambition in life. But my dear friends, understand, this is how Patanjali so beautifully explains that dispassion is not lack of passion, but rather it is having that passion without any attachments. It is still having that inner drive to achieve the purpose of your life, but without the weight and the excess baggage of attachments that we keep carrying around in our life. Yes, literally, we are carrying tons and tons of unnecessary baggage on our shoulders and trying to race this marathon of life. And what happens if we carry all these baggages? They weigh us down. They drain our energy. They strain us constantly. They lead to fatigue, frustration, and eventual depression. These excess baggages need to be given up. And what are these excess baggages? Are all these unnecessary attachments that we carry. So a very, very practical tip is to start by saying no to all these distractions that we have in our life. At least to begin with, learn to regulate your lifestyle. And even if you need to indulge with caution with all these distractions. Set a limit to how much time you're spending. For example, how much time you spend on social media and all other avocations of your life. Set a time limit. Be very clear. Write down what your goals of the day are and proceed by giving enough time to what is really of substance to you, what really matters to you, and don't unnecessarily indulge in all these distractions, right? That is where we learn to put the brake in the journey of our life. However, remember, as I said, brakes only prevent accidents, right? Brakes do not take you forward. If you really want to move ahead in your journey of life, we also need to learn how to press the accelerate pedal, right? Avoiding the negative prevents us, it protects us. But unless you add the positive, we will not grow in our life. This is the balance that we need to discover in our own life. Samatvam yoga muchyate, as Lord Krishna defines in the Bhagavad Gita, that the art of balance is what yoga is all about. Yoga and spirituality in its deepest essence teaches us how to harmonize everything in our life so that we progress towards a higher destination. So what is this? What are these positive aspects? What is that accelerator that we need to press in our life? These are our spiritual practices, whether it be asanas, pranayama, meditation, chanting, any form of yoga. As we know, yoga means to connect. Any process, any kind of a practice that helps you to connect to your deeper essence, and by connecting to your deeper essence, helps you to discover that innate connection with the divine, is what we can call as yoga. And Patanjali very beautifully describes what should be the nature of this kind of spiritual practice. Whichever practice we adopt, it needs to follow these three very, very important characteristics. First, he defines that the nature of our spiritual practice should be prolonged. It should be long. The idea is that there is the mind, because of its nature to keep fluctuating all the time, it likes to jump like a monkey from one branch to another. And this tendency to keep changing also creeps into our own spiritual practice. And therefore, we see today the same social media which is distracting us can also distract us in our own spiritual practices by tempting us by trying to follow different kinds of practices. But Patanjali very beautifully, he explains that the nature of our practice should be ekatattva. Pick up any one practice and stick to that practice, right? A prolonged practice is more powerful than trying varieties of practices, right? Today, we want to keep trying this style of practice, that style of practice, some third style of practice, right? The mind is constantly being distracted, or mind enters into that mode of distraction even through spiritual practices. So don't let the mind trick you into this kind of a distractive mode, but stick to one form of practice. That is the key to really accelerate forward, right? So the key, very, very important, if you want to develop that kind of a dedication to one kind of a practice for a prolonged duration, the important virtue that we need to develop is patience. Don't lose your heart. There will be failures, but keep maintaining that patience. Move ahead in your journey, move ahead in this journey of life, right? But make sure that you continue your practice for a prolonged duration of time. That is the first tip that Patanjali gives us. The second tip in our long journey in detoxifying our mind is to ensure that even in this long journey, there should be uninterrupted practice. It is not just sufficient to say that, oh yes, I have been practicing yoga and spirituality for 10 years. Every day on the International Yoga Day, I do yoga, right? And the rest of the 365 days, I don't do it, right? That is not the case. It should be uninterrupted, right? As the famous saying by Mark Twain goes, he said once that giving up smoking is the most easiest thing. I have done it at least 1,000 times, right? So this is how we say, oh, it's so easy to start yoga. I have done it thousands of times, right? But no, it's not about how long you've been doing your touch and go yoga practice, right? But if you really want to have a deep, impactful and meaningful practice, then it should be uninterrupted, right? And the key to develop this kind of an uninterrupted yoga practice is developing a sense of determination towards our spirituality and our yoga practices. Determination is a key, and the determination is best cultivated when we surround ourselves with such kind of like-minded practitioners. That is the power of being in fraternity of spiritualists, being in the association of fellow spiritual seekers and practitioners. Just by being in the company of like-minded people, we see that it instills determination within us. And when needed, we can share some of our own determination to somebody else in need, right? By developing that power of synergy in that association, in that fraternity, in that company, we see that our journey will go ahead, our spiritual journey will go ahead uninterrupted and for a very long time, right? So yes, our practice should be for a prolonged duration, and two, our practice should be uninterrupted. But the third and perhaps the most important characteristic of our spiritual practice, that it should be done with all sense of earnesty. Understand that you are putting your heart into this, because the real transformation happens when you invest your entire mind, consciousness, and your heart into that practice. That is what defines the quality of our practice. Otherwise, it just becomes a mere ritual. If you're not putting your entire soul into that practice, if you're not putting your entire heart into that practice, then you're removing the spirit out of that practice, right? When you remove the spirit out of a spiritual practice, it just reduces to a mere ritual, and mere rituals do not give the due results, right? So we need to put all our earnesty into that practice. And the key to developing that right earnesty is remaining enthusiastic, right? In fact, enthusiasm is the most important currency that will help us fetch spiritual goods, spiritual progress in our own life journeys. And this enthusiasm needs to be protected. Do not let external doubts and influences disrupt this little tender enthusiasm that we may have. And protect that enthusiasm by constantly reading books on yoga and spirituality, by constantly interacting with like-minded people, and most importantly, engaging in these kinds of discussions and discourses and courses and through training. That is what ensures that this enthusiasm not only sustains, but it is nourished and it grows stronger and stronger year after year, right? And this earnesty is what is going to mature our prolonged and uninterrupted practice into something so beautiful and meaningful, right? So this is how Patanjali, he gives us three very, very important guidelines how to press the accelerator, right? So with this fine balance of how do I break with dispassion, which means by protecting myself, by avoiding all the unnecessary indulgences, right? This is how I'm shielding myself from further distractions and having some kind of a balanced, restricted lifestyle. So that is the brake of the car of our journey of life. And we also need to press the accelerator. And what is that accelerator? We spoke of three things. Our spiritual practice should have these three important characteristics. It should be prolonged. And to keep that prolonged practice, we need to develop the right patience. Second, we spoke how the nature of that practice, it should be uninterrupted. And for it to be uninterrupted, we have to keep ourselves determined by being in the company of like-minded practitioners. And third, most important thing to keep our accelerator going, that our practices should be performed with all earnesty and sincerity. And that is what is going to give true meaning to our spiritual practices. And with this very, very fine balance of the positive acceleration and the braking deceleration, with this fine balance, that is how we can learn to deal with this mind, right? To think that we can otherwise remain happy without learning to address the mind is living in a fool's paradise. So we have to understand that ultimately that the reality that the world around us is completely shaped by our own mind. And this importance of learning to control the mind is so, so very important. And using these very, very practical tips that we discover from great sages like Patanjali, we can learn to detoxify our mind and live a very happy, progressive spiritual life. Thank you all so much. I once again thank you for participating in the Krishna Fest, and we hope to see you involving with us in multiple such programs. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.